Close your eyes for a second. It's Friday night. 1998. You're in the back seat of your parents' car. The strip mall is lit up, and you already know where you're going. There's only one place that smells like carpet, popcorn, and possibility. Blockbuster Video. At its peak, Blockbuster had 9,094 stores across the world, 60 million registered members, 9,000 employees, revenue of over $6 billion a year. On a Friday night in 1998, more Americans were inside a Blockbuster than at any other retail location on the planet. Today, there is one Blockbuster left on Earth. It's in Bend, Oregon. It sells T-shirts to tourists who want a photo with something that no longer exists. This is not a story about a company that got unlucky. This is a story about a company that watched its own killer being built, step by step, and chose at every single moment to do nothing. To understand how Blockbuster died, you first have to understand how powerful it was. Blockbuster was founded in 1985 by David Cook in Dallas, Texas. Cook had one insight that changed everything. Video rental stores were tiny, disorganized, and family-run. Nobody had scaled them. He opened his first store with 8,000 VHS tapes and a computerized inventory system, unheard of at the time. Customers could search for a title and know instantly if it was in stock. The store made $700,000 in its first year. Cook opened a second, then a third. By 1994, Blockbuster was opening a new store every 17 hours. Viacom bought it for $8.4 billion. At the time, one of the largest media acquisitions in history. Blockbuster wasn't just a video rental company. It was infrastructure. It was the way America watched movies, and it had one business model detail that made it extraordinarily profitable. Late fees. If you returned your tape or DVD a day late, Blockbuster charged you. Sometimes more than the original rental cost. In 2000, Blockbuster collected $800 million in late fees, roughly 16% of its total revenue. Customers hated late fees, universally, deeply. But they kept coming back because there was nowhere else to go. That monopoly on inconvenience would become the crack in the foundation. In 1997, a software engineer named Reed Hastings returned a copy of Apollo 13 to his local Blockbuster. It was 6 weeks late. The fine was $40. Hastings was embarrassed. He hid the receipt from his wife. And on the drive to the gym, he had a thought that would eventually be worth $300 billion. What if video rental worked like a gym membership? You pay a flat monthly fee. You watch whatever you want. No late fees. Ever. In 1997, Reed Hastings and Mark Randolph co-founded Netflix, not as a streaming service. The internet wasn't fast enough for that yet. As a DVD by mail subscription. You went online. You chose your DVDs. They arrived in a red envelope. You watched them, sent them back, and your next ones shipped automatically. No late fees. No driving. No, sorry, that one's out of stock. In 1998, Netflix had 239,000 subscribers. Blockbuster had 60 million members and 6,000 stores. Nobody at Blockbuster was worried. In the year 2000, Reed Hastings flew to Dallas. He walked into Blockbuster's corporate headquarters and asked for a meeting with CEO John Antioco. His proposal: Blockbuster acquires Netflix for $50 million. Netflix becomes Blockbuster's online arm. Together, they dominate both physical and digital rental. John Antioco laughed him out of the room. In fairness to Antioco, and this is important to understand, Netflix was losing money. It had 300,000 subscribers. It smelled like a niche product for tech enthusiasts who didn't want to drive to a store. $50 million for a DVD mail company felt absurd in 2000, especially to a man running a $6 billion empire. Hastings flew home. He had been rejected, but he had also seen something in that meeting that Antioco hadn't shown him. Blockbuster wasn't afraid of Netflix, and that was the most useful information he'd ever received. Between 2000 and 2003, Netflix's subscriber base grew from 300,000 to 1.5 million. Revenue went from $36 million to $272 million. Blockbuster noticed, and for the first time, they started to think about responding. They were already 2 years too late. What followed between 2003 and 2007 is a masterclass in how large companies die, not with a bang, but with a series of small, reasonable-sounding decisions that compound into catastrophe. Fatal decisions number 1. Blockbuster Online, 2004. In 2004, Blockbuster finally launched its own DVD by mail service, Blockbuster Online. And it was actually good. Better than Netflix in some ways. Subscribers could return their online rentals to a physical store and get a free in-store rental in exchange, something Netflix could never offer. By 2005, Blockbuster Online had 1 million subscribers. Netflix had 4.2 million. The gap was closing. Then came fatal decision number 2. Fatal decision number 2. The board fires. John Antioco, 2007 John Antioco, the same man who had laughed Reed Hastings out of the room in 2000, had changed his mind. By 2004, he understood the threat. He was pouring money into Blockbuster Online, cutting late fees to compete, and genuinely trying to transform the company. The problem was that transformation is expensive. Blockbuster's profits were dropping. Shareholders were furious. One activist investor named Carl Icahn led a campaign to remove Antioco from the board. He called the strategy reckless. He said Blockbuster was spending too much on competing with Netflix. In 2007, Antioco was pushed out. His replacement, Jim Keyes, a former 7-Eleven executive. Jim Keyes made his position clear almost immediately. In a 2008 interview, he said, "I've been frankly confused by this fascination that everybody has with Netflix. Netflix doesn't really have or do anything that we can't or don't already do ourselves." He cut the budget for Blockbuster Online. He scaled back digital investment. He refocused the company on its physical stores. In 2008, Netflix had 8.4 million subscribers. It had just launched its streaming service. Jim Keyes was stocking shelves. Fatal decision number 3. Ignoring streaming, 2007 to 2010. In 2007, Netflix introduced streaming. For the first time, you didn't need to wait for a red envelope. You could watch a movie instantly, on your laptop, from your sofa. The internet had finally caught up to the idea. Blockbuster's response was slow, underfunded, and incoherent. They launched a streaming product. It had fewer titles, a worse interface, and was buried inside a company that still believed its stores were its future. Meanwhile, Netflix signed deals with studios, invested in bandwidth, and built recommendation algorithms that made every user feel like the platform knew them personally. By 2009, Netflix had 12 million subscribers. Blockbuster had $1 billion in debt and was closing stores at a rate it couldn't control. 2010 was the year the numbers became unsurvivable. Blockbuster filed for bankruptcy in September 2010. It had $900 million in debt and 3,000 stores left. Dish Network bought what remained of Blockbuster in 2011 for $320 million, a company that had sold for $8.4 billion just 17 years earlier. The store closures came in waves, hundreds at a time, then thousands. By 2013, there were fewer than 50 Blockbuster stores left in the United States. By 2018, there were 2. By 2019, there was 1. The last Blockbuster on Earth is in Bend, Oregon. It's run by a woman named Sandy Harding, who has managed it since 2000. She never planned to be the custodian of a cultural relic. The store now sells candles, T-shirts, and nostalgia. Tourists drive hours to stand in front of the sign and take a photograph of something that used to be everywhere. Netflix's market cap today, over $300 billion. Blockbuster's last valuation before collapse, approximately 0. Here is what most people get wrong about this story. They say Blockbuster died because it didn't innovate, because it was too slow, because it didn't see streaming coming. But that's not quite right. Blockbuster saw Netflix. They built their own version. They had stores that Netflix could never replicate. They had 60 million customers who already trusted them. What killed Blockbuster wasn't blindness. It was the gap between knowing something is true and being willing to act on it when acting is painful. Every time Blockbuster moved toward the future, short-term pressure pulled them back. When Antioco cut late fees and invested in online, shareholders revolted. When Blockbuster Online started working, the board replaced the CEO. When streaming arrived, the new leadership called it irrelevant. The lesson isn't about technology, it's about institutional courage. Blockbuster knew what needed to happen. They had the resources to do it. They had a head start on their own online service. They had physical infrastructure Netflix would have paid billions for. What they didn't have was a leadership structure willing to absorb short-term pain for long-term survival. Netflix had one advantage that no amount of store count or subscriber base could replicate. Reed Hastings had nothing to protect. No stores, no late fee revenue, no shareholders addicted to the old model. He could build the future because the past wasn't paying his bills. On a Friday night in 1998, 60 million Americans were Blockbuster members. On a Friday night in 2024, 260 million people opened Netflix. The distance between those two Friday nights is not technology. It's a series of decisions, made in boardrooms, by people who knew what was coming and chose, again and again, to wait one more quarter. One more quarter became one more year. One more year became bankruptcy. And bankruptcy became a T-shirt shop in Bend, Oregon. If you want the real stories behind the world's biggest businesses, subscribe to Behind the Billions. New episode every week. Next episode, the company hiding inside McDonald's that has nothing to do with burgers.